Fernando Sor is one of our master composers, and obviously his formal sense of a piece is very clear. Well, but not always in his editions. This is Opus 6 number 9, the famous D minor study, which is very, very nice, and the form is not totally clear. At this point, there is a repetition. At least all the editions have that repetition sign after bar 10. But there's another double bar line, which is 8 bars later after bar 18. And this one is different in different editions. The first edition of Missionnaire and the London edition just shows a double bar line, just as some kind of interruption, formally speaking. But Napoleon Coste included this study in his elaboration of Sor's method, and he put in a repetition at this point. And we have to look at this because that can be very interesting and intriguing. So here you see Coste's repetition sign. Is that simply an error, or is that with intention? And what do we do with the first repetition? Do we have to do both? And does this second repetition mean that we have to repeat bar 11 to 18 or all the beginning? Well, let's have a look on this. So let's briefly repeat what is a sonata in minor. We have a first theme in the minor key, which is the main key of the piece, and we could expect a second theme, but not in the dominant as it would be in a major sonata, but in the relative major key. So we should expect a second theme in F major. Well, if this is a monothematic sonata, there would be no second theme. But actually in this study we have a section that is an F major, which could at least harmonically work as a second theme. Well, normally in a sonata, those two characteristics of first and second theme should be really very different, at least contrasting. So some talk about the female and the male theme, so really a huge difference, so to say. And probably here at this point we don't have that huge difference if we listen to the second theme. It's different, but it's really, really contrasting. If we have a look on the form, we see in red the first theme in D minor, which are 8 bars, and then 2 bars attached, which can work as a bridge because there is a modulation to the dominant. At that point, or we have the repetition from the beginning, or we will be going on and reaching what is in this more orange section, the second theme. Here we are in F major, which is the relative major of D minor. After this, we have the questionable repetition or not, anyway, the double bar line here in this point, which at least concludes clearly what could be an exposition in a sonata form. Now, the blue part going on is what we should consider the development of the sonata, so the motivic and melodic work a composer does with the themes exposed in the exposition. Red again is the recapitulation, so the repetition of the first theme, and the first theme in red is actually repeated quite precisely with a very little but important difference, which even experienced teachers and players sometimes forget to play. There are mostly sixths, but there are some thirds in here, which could be easily forgotten if you just repeat what the exposition was. And in the what should be the recapitulation of the second theme, we have a mixture from parts that only appear in the development and something that derives, so to say, from the second theme section. And at the end, a conclusion of all the piece, which is here in gray, more or less. So actually, we could see a minor sonata form. So let's have a look on the first theme if it's monothematic. We have probably up to this point the very first idea. We are going around the D, turning back to D melodically in this point, in a parallel movement in sixth with the tenor part or contralto. So it's D minor, it's Andante Agitato, at least in the Simrock editions, Andante Allegro in the Missione and the London editions. And that is interesting because Allegro in Italy actually, or in Italian, means happy and gay, and agitato means agitated, so not really happy and relaxed, so to say. And this is interesting because the Germans in Simrock in Bonn, Berlin, probably thought that should be more dramatic, more an agitated taste in D minor here than an Allegro taste. Segovia, by the way, writes con calma. Okay, so back to the theme. It's going in parallel sixth. It's mainly melismatic, so there are no really big jumps. The biggest one is a third that we have in here at this point. And that's it. The rest is just going in seconds parallelly in the sixth intervals. And we have regular eights at the rhythm throughout, which makes it to some mean very baroque, so to say. Could be nearly a baroque prelude because the rhythm is not characteristic at all, going on in that regular eights. The theme 2, or what could be the second theme, is rhythmically speaking as regular as the first one, with one important difference. Look at the last note of the first two bars. This is in the soprano a quarter note, and as in the soprano before, in the third theme, we had 8 notes throughout. This is a difference that we at least should note. Then the melody is not in parallel sixth, but thirds. And then we have a really major jump. This is a major sixth going up, and we don't have that kind of intervals, melodically speaking, in the third theme. So this is contrasting. And the third interesting thing, at least to me, is that we have 3 parts of 5 eighths note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how does this quarter note come out? Well, we have to be very careful not to play this B flat too loudly, because if we do so, we arise the impression that the melody is going in this way, which is not true. It is, and then. So this is an important point to obey. In conclusion, tonally, this is F major, so the relative major of D minor, which should be one of the rules to obey if you have a second theme in a minor sonata. It is different. It's going in thirds. There is that major sixth jump in here, and the rhythmic conclusion is different. So it's probably not completely contrasting as black to white, but anyway, it's different. So to my taste, this is a kind of second theme section and should, in that sense, be part of the exposition of the piece. But as it's not really completely contrasting, even the monothematic theory is valid. Anyway, we have to talk about that repetition possibility that Coste gives us in his edition. If we have the second theme section, it very much makes sense to repeat from the very beginning. So we have the exposition with both thematic areas in repetition, which would be typical for a sonata form. So the first repetition that actually is in all editions is after bar 10, where we have this would underline very much the theory of the monotheme. So this would be the end of the exposition, and this one would be part of the development. But as we have it in F major, it could very well be the second theme section. And after this, actually, we get a modulation with material which apparently is new. And that is a typical work one does in a development. Here is a little sign, just look at it, watch at it, stop the video if you like. I don't want to explain too much things, but anyway, we have elements from the second theme section that are combined to the melodic movements in seconds, going by parallel sixths from the first theme. So it's all in here. Everything which is marked in red is part of the first theme, and everything marked in orange is part or derives from the second theme. So there is a clear development of both sections as a sonata should have. Now let's go to the recapitulation. If there is a two-theme sonata, we should have the recapitulation of the first theme in the original key and the second theme in the original minor key as well. And here Sor differs from what should be the rule or the Sonata-Form, because we have the repetition obviously of the first theme, with the major difference that we have those thirds, where in the first theme have been 6, so it was. And then we go up. This part is almost identical to what we had in the development. And this line derives to some way to the movement that we have in the second theme section. So it's more, how to say, a recapitulation of what happened in the development rather than what could be the second theme. But a sonata and the ideal form, so to say, of the sonata was not really a law. You had to compose a sonata in that way. But it was statistically what most people did. And you could, and at that time they did vary the thing very much. And in this point we have something deriving from the second theme and from the development at the same point, which is interesting and very nice as well, and does not spoil the idea of a sonata, just as it's not as the ideal regular sonata could be. So in the conclusion, we find material of both thematic areas in the repetition and the recapitulation, and it's obviously mostly focused on the first theme section, which underlines the one thematic, monothematic theory of the sonata. But those inaccuracies that differ from what would be an ideal sonata anyway suggest that you could think it in a bi-thematic, so with a second theme section. And if this is so, if you take it as a two-theme sonata, it's possible to avoid the first repetition after bar 10 and repeat the whole exposition after bar 18. So you have twice first and second theme in the order. I would suggest one thing. At the end, we have this F major. And if we now repeat from the beginning, we jump back to D minor. What you now could do actually is to put in a dominant to bring us back from F major to D minor. Well, this is written at no place in the piece, but we are free. Let's take it as if we were in the time of Sor, and that would be allowed to do. And probably Sor did it as well, and that could be one of the reasons why Coste put in those repetition signs after bar 18. Okay, that's it. So, thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye.